Let's dive right in to this deep dive. Shall we say we're taking a deep dive into a deep dive. We're going to be looking at the history of America's political parties.
Ooh, wow.
The Democrats and the Republicans.
Two big ones.
Two big ones. And, we're going to untangle how these powerhouses have evolved over centuries. Starting from their origins to the figures that really shaped their identities and their platforms. It's going to be fascinating, especially when we get to the more recent events. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize just how much change has happened within the parties.
Right.
To really get a sense of where we are today, you really have to go back to the beginning, back to the 1800s, when the political landscape was totally different.
All right, so let's set the scene.
Okay.
We're in 1828.
Okay.
And Andrew Jackson, he's kind of a larger-than-life figure,
Yeah.
founds the Democratic Party.
Right.
He's all about the common man, representing, agrarian interests and advocating for states' rights.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to this, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. The early Democratic Party, you can't really talk about it without talking about slavery,
Right.
which was a huge issue back then.
Right.
And, their support for slavery, which was particularly strong in the South,
Right.
would later contrast sharply with,
Right.
their stance on civil rights later on.
Which is so interesting to think about, right?
Yeah.
Like that whole shift.
Wild.
It's just wild. So then we fast forward a little bit, and in 1854, the Republican Party emerges.
Yeah, and they show up with a very different focus.
Right.
They are opposed to the expansion of slavery.
Right.
They really believe in a strong federal government.
Okay.
And they see that as the only way to prevent slavery from spreading.
Right.
So this key difference between the two parties really sets the stage for what happens next, the Civil War and the period of Reconstruction afterwards, both of which would completely transform both parties.
And it's the Republican Party under Abraham Lincoln
Right.
that really, leads the charge against slavery during the Civil War.
Right.
Which is a huge turning point for them.
Totally. Yeah. The Republicans become the party of abolition.
Right.
And of, keeping the Union together.
Right.
And the Democrats, especially in the South, find themselves kind of on the wrong side of history on this huge monumental shift.
It's so wild to think about how profoundly historical events can shape a party's identity
Totally.
in ways that would have seemed unimaginable
Yeah.
just a couple of decades before.
Yeah, for sure. And that dynamic of transformation
Right.
continues to play out over the 20th century as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, you have the Great Depression in the 1930s,
Right.
and then Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal.
Right.
And that brought about a major shift for the Democrats.
Yeah, Roosevelt's response to the Depression, with social welfare programs, economic reforms, really solidified that image
Yeah.
of the Democrats as the party of the working class, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah.
And it broadened their appeal
Right.
to include minorities, working class Americans,
Right.
intellectuals who believed in a more, hands-on role for the government
Yeah.
in fixing social and economic problems.
Right.
So this era, really lays the groundwork for their current focus on social justice,
Right.
economic equality,
Yeah.
things like that.
Totally.
Okay.
So then fast forward, again, just a few decades, the civil rights movement of the 1960s
Right.
really throws another wrench into things,
Totally.
especially for the Democrats.
Especially for the Democrats. This is where we see the emergence of what's called the Southern strategy
Right.
used by Republicans.
Okay.
They begin appealing to white Southern voters,
Right.
many of whom felt alienated by the Democrats' support for civil rights.
Okay.
So this strategy,
Right.
which emphasized states' rights
Mm-hmm.
and a more, conservative approach to social change, would have really long-lasting consequences.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this one strategy
Right.
really reshaped the electoral map
Yeah.
and gave Republicans this stronghold
Yeah.
in the South, which had been a Democratic stronghold for so long.
Exactly. And it really shows, this recurring theme in American political history.
Right.
That the parties aren't static.
Right.
They're always changing.
Yeah.
They adapt.
Right.
They evolve.
Yep.
And sometimes they even switch positions on fundamental issues
Right.
in response to, societal changes or
Right.
political maneuvering.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've moved through some really pivotal moments in American history.
Yeah.
Seen how both parties have been shaped by major events,
Mhm.
how they've responded to the changing, needs and anxieties of the electorate.
For sure.
But let's fast forward a little bit more
Okay.
to the 1980s,
Yeah.
the era of Ronald Reagan.
Ah, yes. Reagan's presidency was a big moment for the Republican Party.
His focus on free market capitalism,
Right.
tax cuts, deregulation,
Yeah,
a strong national defense
right.
really resonated with a big chunk of the voters.
It seems like he really tapped into this growing sense of disillusionment
Yeah.
with what some people saw as, the failures of liberal policies.
He did. And he also was really good at appealing to the moral majority.
Okay.
This group of conservative Christians
Right.
who were becoming really influential in politics.
Right.
This alliance further cemented the Republican Party's connection to social conservatism and economic kind of libertarianism.
Right. So by the end of the 20th century,
Yeah.
both parties had gone through these really significant transformations.
Transformations, yeah.
The stage is set for the political landscape we see today, but there's still so much more to uncover.
Oh, yeah.
What happens next?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The dawn of the 21st century brings us the rise of Donald Trump.
And with him, a wave of change
Yeah.
that a lot of people say is unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Right.
Totally unprecedented.
Okay.
So, yeah, the 2010s,
Yeah.
the emergence of Donald Trump
Right.
really brought you could say like a seismic shift
It really did.
to American politics.
I felt like an earthquake was happening
It did, yeah.
as we were watching it.
Yeah.
What was it about Trump, though,
Yeah.
that resonated so strongly with, a certain segment of the American population?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you could say that he really represented a departure
Okay.
from traditional Republican values.
Okay.
He blended populism and nationalism
Okay.
with a very, aggressive,
Yeah.
confrontational style of politics.
Right.
And I think this really appealed to voters who felt ignored by the establishment, by the elites,
Right.
people who felt like the system wasn't working for them.
Yeah, they were disillusioned with how things were going. They wanted change.
His rallies were certainly captivating.
They were.
It felt very much like a show.
Yeah.
People were drawn to his straightforward language. He promised to drain the swamp in Washington,
Yeah.
make America great again.
Yeah. Very catchy slogans.
Yeah, very simple,
Yeah.
messaging that really got through.
Right. And his policies and rhetoric, though,
Right.
they caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah, definitely. So much controversy.
I mean, his stance on things like immigration, trade,
Right.
foreign policy were often criticized
Yeah.
as divisive, even dangerous.
Right.
And, his use of social media
Yes.
to attack opponents,
Yeah.
spread misinformation,
Right.
was just unlike anything we'd seen from a president before.
Right.
I mean, it really was unprecedented.
There were accusations of racism, sexism, xenophobia
Yeah, all of that.
that were leveled against him throughout his campaign and his presidency. Throughout, yeah. And it felt like the nation was constantly on edge,
Yeah.
just waiting for the next, tweet storm
Yeah.
or the next inflammatory remark.
Right. And it's important to acknowledge
Yeah,
that Trump's presidency really created this deep divide
it did, yeah.
within the Republican Party itself.
Yeah, there were some Republicans who just embraced him completely,
Became very loyal.
totally loyal.
Yeah.
But there were others who were troubled by his behavior, by his rhetoric.
Yeah.
They felt like he had, hijacked the party
Right.
and betrayed its core principles.
Yeah, and it seems like that struggle,
Yeah.
that internal struggle, is still going on.
It is.
Right.
The Republican Party is still trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah, like what is their identity?
Yeah. Are they the party of Trump,
Right,
with this focus on populism and nationalism?
right,
Or will they go back to their more traditional conservative roots?
right.
It's a big question.
It's a question that's going to shape their direction
Absolutely.
for years to come.
It will, yeah. So while all of this is happening with the Republicans,
Right.
the Democrats are also going through some changes.
Okay.
Maybe not as dramatic
Right.
or turbulent.
Right. It seems like they've doubled down
Yeah.
on their focus on social justice,
Yeah.
diversity, addressing inequalities.
Yeah, that's become a key part of their platform.
It seems like it. Yeah.
They're really focusing on issues like climate change,
Yeah.
healthcare access, LGBTQ plus rights,
Right.
racial justice,
Yeah.
and they're often taking more progressive stances
Okay.
than they did in the past.
And their coalition seems to have broadened as well
It has.
to include a more diverse range of voices.
Yeah, reflecting the changing demographics
Right.
of the country.
Yeah. And there's a real emphasis now
Yeah,
on inclusivity
definitely.
and representing, marginalized communities.
Exactly. But, this approach has been criticized too.
Of course.
Some people say it's too focused on identity politics,
Right.
that it alienates more moderate voters.
Right. So there's this constant balancing act
It is, yeah.
for any political party
Yeah, sure.
to appeal to a broad base while staying true to their core values.
You got to do both.
Got to do both somehow. So it seems like today,
Yeah.
the ideological divide between the two parties
Yeah.
is wider than ever.
It does feel that way. It feels like this giant chasm
Right.
has opened up.
Yes.
And it's led to a lot of polarization,
Yeah.
gridlock in the government,
Yeah.
a lot of frustration
Yeah, a lot of frustration.
among Americans.
It feels like we're living in this time of perpetual political turmoil.
It does, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And all of that leads us to a very recent
Yeah.
and concerning development.
Oh, yeah.
So just yesterday, after his inauguration
Right,
for a second term,
right.
Trump released a video that has really sent shockwaves
Shockwaves, for sure.
through the political arena.
Yeah, this video has already gone viral.
I've seen it.
Yeah, it's causing quite a stir.
Yeah.
So in this video,
Yeah.
Trump strongly implies
Okay.
that the voting machines were manipulated
What?
to make sure that he won, casting doubt
Okay.
on the integrity of the election.
He's basically saying the election wasn't fair.
He is, yeah.
Wow.
He doesn't offer any real evidence
Well, okay.
to back up these claims,
Right.
but the message is clear.
Right.
He's saying that his win
Yeah.
was engineered somehow
Wow.
and that the election wasn't legitimate.
It's a pretty dangerous claim,
It is. It's a very dangerous claim,
especially considering
his track record.
right, like he has a history
Yeah,
of making these unfounded allegations about voter fraud
which have been repeatedly debunked
by courts,
election officials. Yeah.
I mean, it's been proven false over and over, right? And this latest video just feels like another attempt
Yeah.
to sow distrust
Yeah.
in the process and to undermine faith in democratic institutions.
And that's what's so worrying about it.
Yeah.
It really raises these serious concerns
Yeah.
about the future of American democracy.
It's a scary thought,
What happens when people lose faith
right?
in their government?
In the very foundation
Yeah.
of how things work.
It's a recipe for instability,
It is.
for chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. It is scary to think about all of this.
Yes.
We've gone through this whole journey,
We have.
looking at the Democrats and the Republicans, how
Yeah.
they've adapted, how they've changed their views on, these fundamental issues. And now it feels like we're in this place
Yeah.
where our democracy,
Yeah.
that very idea of free and fair elections
Right.
is being questioned.
It's a really critical moment.
It is.
I mean, the whole stability of any democracy
Yeah.
really relies on people trusting
The elections,
the process.
the process, exactly.
Mhm.
And when that trust starts to go away,
Right.
it can have huge consequences.
Yeah, things can get really unstable.
For sure.
So where do we even go from here?
That's the big question.
It is a big question. What does this mean for American politics?
Yeah.
What does this mean for, the listener?
Right. What does this mean for everyday people?
Yeah, trying to navigate all of this.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to deal with this.
Right.
I mean, the decisions that these parties make,
Right?
the leaders they choose, the policies they put in place,
Yeah,
they affect everything,
they do.
every part of our lives.
Yeah, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. Healthcare,
Yeah.
the economy,
Vacation.
education, the environment, all of it is shaped by what's going on in politics.
So it feels like it's more important than ever
It does.
to be informed,
Yeah,
to
okay.
really engage in, thoughtful discussions about these issues,
Absolutely.
to hold our leaders accountable. Yes, we can't just sit back
Right.
and let things happen.
We can't be passive.
We can't be passive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to be active participants.
Yeah. This deep dive has been quite a journey.
It has.
We've looked at the twists and
Or
turns.
the ups and downs.
Yeah, of American political history, the evolution of these two major parties,
Yeah.
the Democrats and the Republicans.
Two giants.
They are giants. And, we've seen how they've changed
Yeah.
their successes, their failures,
Their struggles.
and we've arrived at this moment.
Yeah.
That feels really uncertain.
It does feel very precarious.
It does. And, we've seen how the past
Yeah.
really shapes the present
Absolutely.
and how the choices we make today will shape the future.
The story isn't over yet.
It's not over.
We're still writing it.
And we all have a role to play
We do.
in how that story unfolds.
So, yeah,
So curious,
stay curious.
stay informed,
Stay informed.
most importantly, stay engaged.
Yeah. Get involved. The future depends on it.
It really does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.